From beyond the farthest reaches of our galaxy they come. Two brains pulsing with a strange energy. These space brains come to share their love of science fiction movies.
Hi and welcome to Space Brains, the show where we joy watch sci-fi movies and then we talk about what was good and what was great. I'm Surrey and this is Mark.
Hi, how you going?
Tonight we're talking about The Lobster.
The Lobster.
So consider this your spoiler warning. If you haven't seen the movie yet, you're going to find out all about it now.
So, Surrey, what was your takeaway from this movie?
My number one takeaway from this movie is that life is hard and finding a partner can be tricky. Love is Blind. Is that a good one to use? I'm gonna go Love is Blind.
Love is Blind, yeah. Well, it does definitely, this movie, present us with an alternate version of our humanity in the way that we fall in love with people and the way we match up with people and the way our relationships develop, and in just such an absurd way, really.
Okay then, Mark. So what, would you classify this as a hope, a warning, or an experiment movie?
Definitely experiment. I think it is showing us a version of human relationships in a very experimental way.
I reckon they've very well distilled the essence of so many facets of our relationships and the way we build people up or take ourselves down, and then the way we try to interact with people in a world where expressing our feelings can be difficult, I suppose, would be a way of looking at it.
For sure. It's a bizarre version of how we deal with each other, you know, and that whole idea of even male friends, you're not really connecting with each other. You're just kind of numbers in a way. You're just next to each other, and it's not really humanity the way we think of it, I think, in our reality.
And speaking of the numbers, this movie, The Lobster, is released in 2015. It was written and directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, along with his buddies. It's won a bunch of prizes at the 2015 Cannes Festival, and it stars Colin Farrell, who we might remember from Total Recall. And it also has Rachel Weisz of The Mummy fame. And she's done a whole bunch of other stuff. It's just, I watched The Mummy and I enjoyed The Mummy the most. So that's the way I think of her. And
yeah, Yorgos wrote it with Ithamo Philippa. And the two of them have worked together on about 3 films now. So they've co-written and then created. So they've got a bit of a partnership going on now.
He's got a couple of these stars of The Lobster actually worked in these earlier films, so Dog Whistle and... So this is his first English language movie, which he decided he had to do in order to sort of break into the next level of movie development.
And it was nominated probably top level for Best Screenplay at the Oscars, and obviously nominated across a lot of other festivals. And you were saying at Cannes, it was a big thing at Cannes.
Oh yeah, it got a lot of stuff there, and I'm not surprised. So before we go too far though, let's give everyone an idea of what the movie's about, a bit of a refresher in case they watched it back in 2015 at Cannes, because...
what an experience that would have been in the Cannes theatre.
There would have been at least 3 people in that movie theatre.
I think that audience would have really had a ball with this movie. They would have really laughed out loud and shrieked in other moments, I think.
Shrieked, do you reckon?
Yes, I think so. Because it does both.
Okay, so let's give a bit of a rundown then of this film. So it opens with a very long, dry shot of a woman driving her car along as she stops on a country road and then quite suddenly shoots a horse dead. Or a pony or something. Yeah. Maybe there's a mule.
I'm not exactly sure. We were still inside the car as well, looking out. So yeah, we're at a bit of distance.
So we're then introduced quite quickly then to David, the primary character, and one of the very few names we actually learn in the film.
That's right, yeah.
In fact, the cast are credited by other features.
Yeah, weird human traits, that's right. Yeah,
Yes.
and David is played by Colin Farrell.
Dave's Colin Farrell, and he's sitting there talking to his, what we take to be his ex-wife or ex-partner, asking about the man that she's seeing, and he wants to know if he wears glasses or contacts. She then tells him, well, it's all over, you have to leave now. So he gets up with his dog and off he goes down. He checks into a hotel, which really does seem a lot more like a prison. He has to stand behind a line. He's got to surrender all of his clothes. He's given standard issue clothing. He's given a number, 101.
And he's asked a lot of personal questions as well, if you remember in the check-in scene.
Oh, yeah, like...
You know, like his sexual preference, his past preferences, his relationship status, and all these other sort of weird, very personal questions.
Very strange.
Yeah, very strange for a hotel.
And eventually we learn after this that he's basically checked into this singles hotel where people who do not have partners go to find a partner. They've got 45 days to find a partner, or they get turned into an animal of choice. David gets asked what his chosen animal is, and the lobster. That's what he's chosen. And he's asked why. Why be a lobster? Well, he says that there's because they live 100 years, they're always fertile, and he's always quite like the sea. It's a very odd choice, lobster.
It is, yeah.
I can understand he wants to live a long time, and maybe he wants to have kids.
Yeah.
So then while he's at this hotel, and he goes through a few strange rituals here. The first day he's there, he has to have his hand tied behind his back to show him why it's good to have two of things. Has to watch little plays, little dramas on stage, demonstrating that when you have a partner in life, everything's better. For example, if you choke, they can give you the Heimlich maneuver and you don't die. It's
a great scene, that one.
Also, then that you don't get raped.
Women need a partner, otherwise they get raped all the time.
I know. I've been wondering about what the benefit of having a partner was all this time.
Yeah.
There you go.
Just the way they put that on stage, it's really quite funny.
Choking and so forth. So then David, at breakfast, he meets a couple of men, a limping man and a lisping man. And the lisping man, he wants to be a parrot, which of course is pointed out as a bit strange, that his primary feature being that he has a speech impediment, but he wants to turn into the only animal that can actually talk. And the limping man, he got his limp because he jumped into the wolf enclosure at a zoo in order to be near his mother, who had been turned into a wolf. He got savaged by all the wolves, but there were two that didn't rip his leg apart, and he likes to think one of them was his mother. I don't know. I'm wondering if maybe the first one in was the one who ate his leg.
Yeah, that's right. It's a good question.
And then they have a dance scene where he meets a few of the women. There's a woman who likes biscuits, butter biscuits. There's a girl who gets nosebleeds, and her best friend, who we learn later on has very beautiful hair.
And the mean woman as well.
Oh, yes, and there's a heartless woman. A woman whom he later learns will be devoid of heart. I think that's what it says.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they also have to go on these hunts for the loners, who we learn are people who have run away from their responsibility of turning to an animal after failing to find a partner. And every time that you bag one of these loners, you get an extra day at the hotel. The loners get turned into animals. It's undisclosed what animals they get turned into. The worst kind, I think.
Yeah, they say
they make reference the worst kind of animal.
Yeah.
Don't know what that is.
No.
And so the rules of this place keep going on. So you're not allowed to masturbate, but every day the tenants get stimulated by the staff, which is dreadful. Not stimulated to climax, just to arousal.
Yeah.
And then masturbation is totally illegal. In fact, the lisping man was caught doing so, and they stuck his hand in a toaster and burnt his hand in front of everyone else at breakfast.
Everyone else just kept eating their breakfast as well. So.
Everyone's just sitting there, just watching this guy getting his hand rather brutally burnt in a toaster. We have, I got to cut for there's just so much in this movie, it's incredible. So as it turns out, they're all looking for partners. The limping man, unable to find another woman with a limp, despite one of them a woman turns up with a limp, but he looked into it, she just had a sprained ankle and she'd be healed later on. No good.
Yeah.
So instead, he smashes his face into a table a few times until he bleeds out the nose so that he can partner up with a bleeding nose woman, which I found that a rather particularly brutal scene. The limping man then gets to go on a 2-week holiday and then finally 2 weeks at a yacht to try and make sure they're compatible. And if they argue too much or they have too many troubles, then they're given a child, which usually does the trick, apparently. David, of course, then, deciding that it's probably easier to fake not having feelings when you do than to fake having feelings when you don't, he decides to pretend to be essentially a bit of a psychopath in order to pair up with this heartless woman. The heartless woman at that point kicks his dog to death in a test. David cries, as you'd expect, and he's found out. He's then dragged to towards the manager's office. She's going to expose him and he'll be turned into something terrible. But with the help of one of the room-maids, we don't really understand why, he tranquilizes this woman and, in fact, takes her off to the animal transformation room. And that's the last we see of her. Do you want to pick up the second half of this?
Yeah, because it's a pretty perfect midpoint of the film. And then from there, he escapes the hotel and enters the woods with the loners, where we learn some of the rules of the loners. And the fact is that they are loners and they're not allowed to form any sort of relationship with each other. They can talk to each other, but they're not allowed to form an actual relationship, male, female, friendship, etc. They're not allowed to flirt. And we're told a very strict rule straight away, which is if they're caught, they are punished. And there's a couple that have their mouths have been cut open, I believe. Slashed. And it's all bandaged and bloodied and all that sort of stuff. And we are also told about the ultimate punishment of red intercourse, which we sort of can imagine what that would be, and it's very distirbing if you think about it.
No, we're not actually told the specifics of it. The narrator, which is this female voice that we've yet to meet, I believe, at this point, she says that she'd heard of the red intercourse, but could only guess at what that meant. Yeah,
and so that character who has been narrating, we see her, and she is a loner, and we get her perspective on David, and she's basically saying that she's looking at him and she likes him. She is interested in him, even though there is this danger involved as being a loner. And so they actually do build a bit of a relationship about rabbits. She loves rabbits, eating rabbits, and he returns the rabbits to her, and their relationship does develop. Then they are chosen and taken to the city with the loner leader. And in the city, they, I suppose, are collecting supplies, I guess. You know, we sort of see them in the shopping mall.
Yeah, and contact lenses.
Yeah, and they're doing some of those things. And we also visit the loner leader's parents. And they seem quite normal, her parents, which is when the rest of them don't. The loners are not.
They seem to talk to each other. Everyone else up to this point has been talking in a very flat, almost autistic sort of fashion, you know, as if they're locked away from real expression. But oddly enough, the loner's leader's parents seem to talk quite lovingly to each other and were clearly very fond and very comfortable around each other, whereas everyone else was very standoffish and a bit awkward. And it makes you wonder the comparison then between the leader, who was the most strict loner, versus her parents.
Maybe that. Yeah, it's a bit of a talking point there. Yeah, and they return to the forest, I guess, with those supplies, and days go by, and they fall in love, basically. David and I think she is known as the short-sighted woman.
Short-sighted woman
in the forest, Rachel Weisz's character. And they do fall in love, and they come up with a cute little code system that they can talk to each other in sign language, and they talk about that. And he keeps giving her rabbits, and she's sort of falling in love with him, and we see that unfolding. And they're doing it behind closed eyes. They then go back to the city, and the leader, in a really good scene, she is realizing that, in fact, they must be falling in love. There's a great scene with the parents playing the music and they start making out. I really liked that scene because I thought it was actually a lot of emotion. You know, suddenly, when the film hadn't had much emotion, suddenly we see David and short-sighted woman really start to get it on because this lovely music that her parents are playing is kind of pulling them into a very romantic moment.
It was like it was opening up some sort of emotion.
Yeah, it was.
It reminded me a lot of what you might see a couple of young
Yeah.
teen lovers who
yeah.
just found each other.
Yes.
So then they
that real lustful
can't let
sort
go of each other.
Yeah, and I actually liked how that scene was there. And you see the leader getting kind of more and more, she's twigging on to what's going on. And from that moment onwards, you see that she needs to punish them. And so it leads to a scene where, again, they're back in the city and Rachel Weisz's character is being told that her eyesight will be fixed. And in fact, she's being blinded. So it's a real horrific turn of event for the character. She gets blinded. She realizes, she attacks. The leader tricks her and she attacks. She thinks she's killing the leader when in fact she's killing one of the other loners. And she's sort of broken and downhearted. And when David then re-enters, learning that she's blind, we sort of see that he's very disappointed because now he's thinking, we're not connected.
Yeah, we're not both short-sighted.
We're not both short-sighted, which is sort of the whole premise of the story.
I find it very,
love.
very funny that they decided to make him short-sighted.
Yes, yeah.
Which was kind of his whole approach, or the whole society, the cultural approach is short-sighted. And
well, again, I guess, you think about the nosebleeds. Oh, we're connected because we are nosebleeds. We're connected because we're short-sighted. We're connected because we're heartless. Like it's such absurd little things, again, that we're going to connect over. So there is a comment there about, I think, probably relationships in our world. Anyway, so then the question for David is, does he, because they were planning on escaping as a couple from the loners, will that still go ahead? And there's a bit of a debate we see through his facial expressions and those scenes. He's helping her, but he's also frustrated by those moments. But then I suppose we're heading towards the climax. He decides yes. And he sort of through code reveals that they will run away. And we have then suddenly a brutal scene where he just knocks the leader out and charges out of the bushes and whacks her when she's not looking. And then she wakes up in a grave with wolves, and dogs around her.
We've previously been told you got to cover your face with dirt, or the wild dogs will come and eat your face. Wild dogs will
eat your face, and they are people that have changed, as we know. So it's kind of a little bit of an irony for the leader that's a loner, and that's going to happen to her. And then we get to this really amazing last scene where, of course, as a couple, they're in the city, and they're talking, and you can see that David's still, he's still a bit undecided, and he decides that he's going to make himself blind. And so he goes to the bathroom and he's got the sharp steak knife up to his eye, and we come back to the short-sighted woman, and we go back to David, and then we come back to the short-sighted woman. And that's the end of the story. We don't get an answer. The film is asking us, does he do it and return, or does he not do it and run away?
Or does he not do it and return?
Yeah.
There's the three options, really. There.
It is the three options. So, and it's a good question, really, to end on with. Again, I just think this is so absurd, this movie, this story and everything, that, the ending is absurd, really, again, yeah.
These endings, though, like that, they're a great opportunity, though, to talk about it, because there are three basic options.
Yes.
And I would love to hear what people think
Definitely.
that is, because I've got what I would like to have happen.
What is that? What is it that you think? What do you think? What do you want to happen? Do you want him to stab his eyes out? What are you thinking at the end of that story?
Well, see, the problem is I can see at the end he's kind of learnt some lessons about life, and the fact, for example, that he doesn't have this short-sighted connection anymore, but nonetheless they've run off. They've developed this sign language together, which, even though she's blind, he speaks it out loud. He says something like, I bend over and tap my left ankle twice, touch my ear. He explains it, and she knows fully what he's saying. So I think maybe he's realised that they do actually have a lot of connections through being forced to live together without being forced to being a partner. They've had to build up a repertoire of relationship.
Yeah, definitely.
But that leaves me to the point where he doesn't run away. So in any case, he ends up with it. But does he go, oh, I love her so much, yes, I will gouge my eyes out so we have this even a greater shared notion? Or does he say, actually, I love her so much, even though we don't have the same eye affliction.
Yeah.
And so I can be with her. And I'm torn between those two because either one is kind of romantic. If you think about it. It's a bit tragic, gouging his own eyes out, but there's lots of blind people who live perfectly happily.
Yeah, that's right, definitely. And she even implies that, doesn't she?
Yeah, she even says you kind of get used to it after a while.
And it's only just happened to her, so she's sort of adjusted to it quite well. Yeah.
So I think he stays with her. I can't decide whether he gouges his eyes out. I think he doesn't. He hasn't shown himself to be dramatic or extreme a character as some of the other characters there. So I'm going to go with he doesn't gouge his own eyes out. He goes back and stays with her.
Yeah.
And because they've discovered that there's more to their relationship than sharing a physical characteristic or trait.
Yeah. And I mean, especially in storytelling, he decided to escape with her. That scene where he does speak out their code and she's like, really? And then the next scene is, him bludgeoning the leader. So you presume that that's what he told her. He said, like, I'm going to get her and then we'll escape.
Only after he actually took the action, because up till then he was singing that Where the Red Roses Bloom by Nick Cave.
Yeah.
With Kylie Minogue, which is about bashing his lovers to death and leaving her to bleed out at the river. And they're by the river or by a waterway.
Yeah.
And I personally was getting the feeling I was going, oh God, no! Is he saying that
he's going to kill her?
They've agreed to like kill her because she's blind now and can't be with So I was actually really quite pleased when he sort of popped out of the bushes and clocked that leader on the head. That's okay then.
But this is the fantastic thing of a film like this, is that you don't know what happens at the end, and it's up to us as the audience. The audience gets to make the decision on what did David do. Did David stay with her? Did he gouge her eyes out, or did he run away? And it's an interesting one. I feel that because the story made it that he decides to run away with her with their special code, he's just doubtful about poking his own eyes out, and that's fair enough. And there's other ways. I mean, she got blinded by a surgeon. Maybe that's what they need to go do. Maybe he needs to get a surgeon to do it. Maybe he can't do it himself. I can't imagine trying to do it myself either. But it does feel like their relationship is strong and they like each other. And in this weird, from the minute we're introduced to David, he's heartbroken. Like his wife is leaving him for another short-sighted man. And so, the quest is for him to find a partner. Otherwise he's going to be turned into an animal. And so you sort of, I think, as an audience member, you're wanting him to find someone, because obviously if he doesn't and he runs away from her, what can he do in the city? They're going to catch him, aren't they? The police or whatever. Where's his papers? All this sort of stuff.
No, they're actually examining people's marriage licenses.
Yes, they just look a bit suspicious. They're examining people.
If there's a man standing by himself in a supermarket or a shopping
you're
centre,
in trouble.
Which I also found was a comical take on, I suppose, the stereotypes and cliches of men being left by their wives in their supermarket while the wife's going off doing all the shopping and the man standing looking like an idiot. I have been in that situation myself a few times. You're standing there going, I would really prefer to be somewhere else, but I will patiently wait.
The way he answered that guard's questions, I thought, he sort of said, oh, well, which shop is she in? And he's like, and he's looking around. It's like, that is the thing, isn't it? I don't know which shop she's in. She's in one of these shops.
Oh, she could be in that one over there.
There's 100 shops in here, it could be in any of them. So it was interesting, that concept. My personal thing is I think he does come back. I'm not sure about him poking his eyes out, so then maybe they need to come up with a new plan. But I do love an ending like this because you just think, it ends with her sitting in the booth on her own. She's waiting. The waiter tops up her water. He hasn't come back. I mean, maybe he's escaping out the toilet window and running away. Your mind just goes with it. I love it. And then you get the credits and your brain is thinking, what is he doing? What's he actually going to do? So I love that sort of ending. I've got to say, anything that makes me think like that at the end of the film is great.
Yeah, I think it was a good way of wrapping it up. I've seen other movies where they try to do the same sort of thing.
Yep.
With I think it was less satisfaction. Sometimes where you're left without a clear answer and none of the possibilities are kind of fit or feel satisfactory. But I think in this case, the three possibilities, you're kind of going, well, they all kind of fit with the tone of the movie and fit with the characters. It wouldn't have mattered which of the three ways he went. It would still suit and would be an appropriate finish.
Yeah.
As opposed to there's movies I've seen where they actually have a fixed ending closing off, and you sort of go, that doesn't match the whole rest of the film.
That's right. Bit of climax. But the more I thought about it, because the fact is the opening is the scorned woman driving down the road, shooting the donkey or pony or whatever it is, dead, violently, and that's all we know of the context. Like, is that a little bit of foreshadowing that maybe he does run away at the end? And that's kind of, a metaphor. That woman is a version of Rachel Weisz's character, because if he runs away, again, he's going to probably be put back through the system, he's going to become an animal. And so she could be the scornful woman. Like, she's blind, she's waiting there, and he never comes, if you imagine also that for her, he never comes back to the table.
Well, I'd like to counter that though with the very next scene where David is sitting there asking whether the man his wife's gone off with has contacts or glasses, as if that is the most important question to ask.
Yes.
Does he wear contacts? And later on in the film, he's taking the rabbits to short-sighted woman, and so he sees someone else to bring her rabbits, and then he
gets jealous,
chases after this guy and sort of wrestles him down and says, "You're wearing contacts, and it wasn't. And so, even at that point there, basically he's still fixated on his own short-sightedness as being an important thing, but by the end, she's blind. He knows that she's not wearing contacts, because that's what he asks when they come back from the city the first time.
Yeah.
Well, what did you get? He said, "Oh, some contacts." Yeah. And you see him suddenly perk up and go, "Oh, are you short-sighted?" Yes. I wore contacts. And so I think, that's my counter argument, is that by the end of it, he's accepted differences. He's accepted there's more to things. So running away, he could do. Still could do, because he has run away from a number of situations in that film where he just couldn't even handle it.
Yeah. Well, I just mean because symbolically, at the start, why is she shooting the donkey or the pony? Is it because obviously there's some sort of broken down relationship? And that person has become an animal. Yeah. So they've gone through that time frame. Now he's running away from everything. You'd presume he's now a loner. So if he runs away from the restaurant at the end of the movie and he's captured, he would just be automatically turned into an animal. So if she's pissed off that he doesn't come back, and then she knows he's a donkey out in the field somewhere, does she go and kill him like the lady at the start? So I'm just saying, it's like a little bit of that's a version of her character. But like we said, it's up to us to decide what happens at the end of the movie. And I'd love to hear some audience reaction to the end of The Lobster. So if you're out there and you watch The Lobster, hit us up and let us know what you think happens at the end of the film.
Yeah, you can get us on Twitter at SpaceBrainsPod.
Yes.
Or Facebook.
Yep.
Look up Space Brains.
Yes.
Type in Space Brains Podcast in Google. I'm sure you'll come across us sooner or later.
You will. Yeah, there's many channels out there of communication.
So while we're at that then, let's crack into the viewing experience.
Yeah, well, look, mine was really opposite to Passengers. This one was a very isolated experience. I went down to my local library, laptop, headphones, sat in a little corner.
That would have been brutal.
So I sat in a little corner and I got right into the viewing experience, and it sucked me in, so even though I was on a laptop and there was people around in the library, etc. I was kind of glued to the screen. And I mean, that scene we've been talking about, I was just like, what is this film going to be about? Here's a lady that's killing an animal straight away. And then coming in on Colin Farrell's character, and it's not a Hollywood film, so we're off behind his head. We can't even see this, good looking, great actor that Colin Farrell is. And we're being told that he's breaking up with a woman and about short-sightedness. And I just straight away was like, wow, what is going on? And the film really kept me on that hook for quite a while. And, when he crossed from the hotel to the loners, it was really interesting, and meeting, the Rachel Weisz character and her being the narrator. It was kind of, okay, she's the narrator and all this sort of stuff. Disturbing, yes. Funny, yes.
Yeah, that's probably about right.
So my viewing experience was both laughing and kind of a bit of creaking in the chair, I think, like a bit of uncomfortableness. But I really liked it. I really did like it. What did you think?
Well, I sat there and watched it of an evening with my wife, like passengers. We don't often get evenings where we can sit together at the same time and watch something, so we did take the opportunity. One thing it made me feel very glad that I had this beautiful woman beside me and didn't have to turn to an animal myself. But I think one of the things that we both really got out of it is it's something we've talked about often, where we talk about how it's really, we really appreciate the fact that we have each other.
Yeah.
Is that there's good times when you're single, but then there's all those times where you're kind of sitting at home alone, just kind of staring at a wall type of thing, or you're, much like in the movie at that dance, you just sort of go out and you kind of dance with someone, but you kind of walk off and like...
Yeah, you go your separate ways.
Yeah, you're like, it's just such a pointless, meaningless, a waste of time almost. Like you just kind of go, well, I could be creative or something, but you don't want to be. You kind of want to meet people, but yeah. So it was really nice to sit there. We had a few moments to talk about it too, which was quite good. So a lot of movies, it's action the whole way through. Even movies which aren't action movies often will splice in so there's not much going on, not much downtime.
Yeah.
This movie had periods of maybe 30 seconds or a minute or so of just kind of silent process where someone's walking, doing something. So we found it was really handy to be able to talk then about this crazy scene or sequence we'd just watched and how it relates to people doing things. So that was, and as I said, it was totally different experience to Passengers, where we didn't talk. We just kind of sat and we watched it and enjoyed it in silence together. This one here, we felt compelled to make comment because there are bits, build up to where he knocks out the leader lady. There's build up where they're making out with the guitars playing. There's a bit where he's with the harpsichord, where there's kind of this silent sequences where you get something's coming. Yeah. Something big is going to happen. And then we're wondering what, because the nature of the film meant that almost anything could happen.
That's right.
At any point, one of the characters could get knifed in the throat or turned into an animal, or could find someone who shares a defining characteristic or something.
Yes, yeah.
So it was a great viewing experience in that sense.
And I mean, it did have that spectacle to it, didn't it, of really good cinema. So that, the blonde girl, when she's got no more days, we go from her last wish and basically having a fight with her best friend. And then we see the horse with the blonde locks.
With the blonde mane.
Yeah, so they deliberately made that. But that and the leader being smacked and, them also, I thought was really interesting in the scene where the loners attacked the hotel, and you thought they were going to annihilate the people in there. But they set them up basically to have a bad relationship, don't they?
To break them up.
To break them up, So it's that was a big surprise to me. I was kind of expecting them sheer violence from the loners.
Oh, geez, I loved in that.
I liked it.
You just brought up there the scene David gets on the yacht where the bleeding nose woman and the limping guy who's been faking bleeding nose.
Yes.
And David then reveals that he's just been faking the blood nose, and that's probably just cherry juice on his shirt.
Yeah.
And they kind of look at each other, and neither of them seem to care. You're expecting in a typical Hollywood movie, it would be
fisticuffs.
Oh my God, you betrayed me. You've been lying to me. I think they both kind of accepted and went, well, we're better off in this situation where we're kind of not living our true selves than we are being turned into animals.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was just a very, very good little disappointing scene.
Yeah. He just tells him to get off the boat. Yeah, he just leaves. He goes, okay then.
Get off.
There's no violence or there's no...
The little girl is saying, stab him. Yeah. Kill him. It's their little daughter. Well, their little daughter that was given to them to stop them from arguing so much.
Well, because her role is to keep them together. So I suppose... It really did feel with that little girl that, she was very robotic almost, that it's like a science experiment and you're not going so well. I'll add in this to the mix to help you, help your relationship. We had, because that's what I first thought when they said, if you start arguing, we'll add a child. And I kind of thought, children can add a lot more arguments. Yeah. But this child was more, I think it's almost like an aid, and she felt a bit robotic.
But that is that play on that classic, we're drifting apart, so maybe we'll have a child. We'll get a puppy or something.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So anyway, I had a good viewing experience, a bit isolated, and it did definitely make you think about your relationships in your life. And I mean, this whole film made me think about, you know, the way we have relationships, and the way we put emphasis on having a relationship and getting a partner. And I think the film is kind of a bit of a cray version of that. You know, it takes that to the extremity.
Does the extreme to expose these points about our culture.
So I mean, we on this podcast we're going to rank films on a bit of a ladder, and obviously last episode, Passengers, that was the first film. So this is our second episode.
Can the Lobster knock Passengers off the top rung?
Well, for me, yes, it does. So just the experience. I loved Passengers. I had a good experience with Passengers, and it was at the top of our ladder. This one for me does go on above it.
I'm going to agree with you right there. Lobster came in. I was looking forward to it. As soon as I read the little synopsis saying people have 45 days to find a partner or turn into an animal, like that was pretty much all I knew about it, which I just thought that sounds like the craziest. How do you make that into a cohesive, sensible film?
Yeah.
And it could have been. It could have gone so badly.
It could have, but it didn't.
The whole thing just works so well. And they're such different films. It feels a bit unfair comparing them because they are so different.
It does.
But I know that The Lobster is going to be haunting me and my companion for years to come. It will definitely be bringing those little scenes are going to be coming back up to me much later on in time.
Just a good reminder for you to be extra nice to your wife so that you don't turn into an animal, as the film suggests. So what about some of the best scenes? We've talked about a few moments in the film now. Label a particular scene that you really like.
Okay, so we'll alternate. So I'll say one scene, and then you can have one, and we'll keep going till we run out of best scenes. I think we'll cap it at maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think just a couple each.
Because there's a lot in there. One that really, really struck me was dancing alone to electronic music.
Yes.
So first of all, they're told, can we dance? Yes, we dance, but we dance alone. That's why we listen to electronic music. And that actually sort of sounded a bit like an 80s, was it, safety dance song? But anyway, so there's a scene where they walk back into the woods after something or other, and there's just all these people in the woods wearing headphones, and it's silent. But they're all doing this wacky rave-style dancing with their arms flipping about, and they're sort of shuffling around and not looking at anyone, and they're not dancing with anyone, but they're all dancing to a different beat. And I have been to a number of goth clubs in Melbourne, and that looks just so much like that, where you just see a whole dance floor full of people, but no one's dancing with each other. Everyone's doing their own, wacky style, from sort of shuffling, looking down at the ground, to the full-on, glow sticks in their hands, flipping about, and that's why it really took me as a scene, was because it spoke to this experiences I had. And for a while there, I was single in Melbourne, going to these goth clubs, and it was you could go up and dance all you liked. It was electronic music for the most part, but you were probably not going to be dancing with other people. You'd be dancing near other people, and I suppose as an extension of that, there's the bit where David and the short-sighted woman synchronize their music, and they finally hit play at the same time, and then they do that sort of slow dance.
Yeah,
I saw that as well. The same goth clubs where finally you'd see someone dancing with someone else, and they'd be doing that as well. Again, dancing to seemingly a different beat to everyone else, but they're in sync. And so just those images, that scene, it really captured the feeling, even though they're in the forest. It was perfect.
Yeah, I liked that scene too, to be honest. It was after the hotel attacking the hotel.
Yeah, I think it was when they came back from the hotel. So it was sort of like
a celebration, I think. They got to all dance alone. So it was kind of good, yeah. And I mean, look, on that, more early in the film, a scene I really liked was the idea of what it is to be, the awkwardness of being single. And so it's in the ballroom. All the women are dressed in that same dress. All the men are dressed in the same outfit, which they get when they check into the hotel, as we're seeing. And it's that absurdity of being single, and the 3 guys are like talking about, I'm going to go have a dance, but they're not dancing. And it's just, again, very awkward. And then Colin Farrell, David character, gets up and he walks over to the girls. And again, the girls have kind of like bunched up together, you know? So it's that real old-fashioned kind of, the guys are on this side and the girls are on the other. And it's like, what is it like to be single? And he goes up and asks her for a dance. And then they have a dance. And like you were sort of saying, that sort of awkwardness on the dance floor is being played out. I thought that was a really nice scene. Just that really emphasising the singledom.
It was actually one of my best scenes as well. In particular, I liked at the end of the singing and the dancing, they open the blinds and it's just still morning. So it's only shortly after breakfast.
Yeah.
It looked, you got the feeling it was an evening and they'd gone, it was like having a night out type thing.
Well, the alarm goes, doesn't it? And straight away they're drawing the blinds and it's like,
get ready to hunt. Rearrange the tables.
Yeah, they're just straight into it. Yeah.
Everyone's back onto the next activity, which is the hunt. They put on their hunting coats, grab their guns, and off they go. Yeah. So scene number 2, because that was actually the dancing is my number 3. So I'm going to lump it in with yours anyway.
You've got an extra
number
one.
2 was the banging their head on the table to get a blood nose. It shocked me. Like I wasn't expecting it because he first gets his blood nose in the pool, and the camera's a long way off, and you do actually see him
whack his head,
Yeah, he's talking with this girl and he's just saying the most...
Talking about breaststroke.
Oh, yeah, so awkward. I was just cringing because he's going, I like to swim too, like all sorts of things, backstroke, freestyle, crawl, breaststroke. I really like breaststroke, and you're going, okay. Oh, I like your bathers, because she had just been doing backstroke.
Yeah.
With her breasts wiggling up above the water in a little bikini. And there he wouldn't stop talking about breaststroke. And so she sort of looks at him and goes, okay.
You're very creepy.
That's a bit, wrong. And so she swims off and the camera stays on him for a moment and, he sort of hangs his head and goes, clearly he's going like that. What am I doing?
And that didn't
What the hell am I
work,
doing? And the camera is a long shot, so you can't quite see what he's doing, but he sort of turns around. And I actually just thought he just turned around and was hanging his head, like as in like, what a tool. I've just sat there talking about breaststroke to some girl and she's clearly creeped out by it.
Yep.
And then he's got a blood nose. I'm going, dude, do he always get blood noses? That seems a bit... But then we have this scene where he's talking with David. David says, I saw you.
Yeah.
And then he just whacks his head.
Yes.
Not once, but like multiple times on the table really hard.
Trying to get a blood nose.
Until he gets a blood nose and he's expressionless. He doesn't cringe. He doesn't pull back for it. And I was just so shocked by the suddenness and the lack of expression he has. It's clearly his desperation, because he indicated a few times that he was getting a partner. Yes. He was not turned into an animal. He abused the other two guys of choosing stupid animals. Yes. One would be thrown in a pot and cooked, and the other one would be a parrot with a lisp.
Yeah.
And he proved it by banging his head. That it stuck in my head. Particularly because later on, when David tries to break them up, they don't. And he stays in it, and David wanders off, distraught. Well, he gets chased out of the boat. But, so that's my number 2 scene.
Yeah. We already talked about really the second scene for me, which is the music. But another scene I thought that was really the music, and they get into their lustful moment. I thought that was really great.
A bit touchy-feely.
But again, when he decides to be with a heartless woman, I thought it was just such a nice scene. He's pretending as much as possible to be with this heartless woman, and they've got an awkward situation. And then they do meet John and the noseblood woman, and they say, we've been arguing, so they've given us this child, the little girl. And John says to the little girl, give David a kiss, give this man a kiss. And she goes up to kiss him, and he says, why on earth would I want to kiss right now? And he kind of shoves her a bit away. And then, to be even more heartless himself, he kicks her.
Yeah.
He just kicks her. Full-grown man kicks her, and she starts screaming out in pain. And I was a bit like, whoa, wow. Like, you don't see the lead character in many films kick a little girl in the shin. And then he adds to that, I hope you get a limp, you'll be more like your father. Like he really and then they walk away. Yeah. And the other thing, again, like we keep saying, like the void of emotion, normal emotion. I mean, John and the nosebleed woman, who are now the mum and dad of this little girl, they don't really do anything. They don't stop him. They don't console the little girl. They just, we have this wide shot of them walking away from it. And I just, I was kind of, intrigued, disturbed, and laughing all in the one moment in that scene. So I think that's a favourite of mine as well.
Yeah, that was quite, again, another shock and funny. I was unsure of how he's going to react to the...
Yeah.
Because he's in there, he's trying very hard to be heartless.
That's right, yeah. But he did a good job, I think. He kept the heartless going. So I'd love, again, to hear any audience members out there listening to know what your best scene was, or a scene that really sticks, that, as we say, the Lobster, something must conjure up in your mind.
Oh, there are so many scenes in there. I could go on all night about it, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go straight to my worst scene.
Oh, okay. Ooh.
Worst scene is the dead dog scene.
Yeah.
Because I found it genuinely upsetting and heartbreaking. If you cast your mind back, he's with the heartless woman and she's suspicious. She's always testing him to make sure he's actually heartless. And he wakes up, David wakes up, and the heartless woman is standing there in front of him. And it just says, I kicked your dog to death, your brother, because the dog was actually his brother. Yeah, he was yelping and moaning. And I was like, oh, gee, that sounds awful. Then I thought to myself, is this like the Olive scene where she pretended to choke? And she just said this to see if he jumps up and races out to find his dog. That's right, yeah. And aha, gotcha.
Yeah.
He was probably thinking the same thing. Oh, she's just testing me.
Yeah.
So he says, oh, well, yes, well, I guess I'll go off to breakfast. And why would I be worried about that, stupid dog? And he gets up to go into the bathroom and the dog is there dead.
Yeah.
Poor old David has a bit of a cry. And I just found this, it was
a tough scene.
It was so confronting.
Yeah.
It was dreadful.
It was a good example of raising the stakes, but because we had, like you said, she tested him during sex. She tested him, out and about. She tested him. She kind of kept testing their relationship. Being so heartless, she was not showing a lot of emotion. But she was really challenging their relationship. And so then for her to kind of take it to that next notch, of killing the dog, it was brutal. For me, it's actually, for not so much, worst scene, because I don't sort of have one, because I did really enjoy it. Like totally, I was really immersed in this. But I guess I was disappointed that we didn't get to see her transform. So the heartless woman, he does take her. And I think again, like it was nice to know that people transform after 45 days and this and that. But I felt like with her, it would have been nice to kind of actually have the punishment
a bit of
served
revenge.
out. Yeah. And how much of that they showed us or not, I don't know. But they could have either shown the animal or something would have been maybe a bit of a just reward for the fact that she killed the dog. Poor little doggies. We all love doggies, don't we? So that's always the problem. But yeah, I felt I was a little bit miffed that we didn't get to see her sort of ending, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's a lack of a worse scene. Just lack of a scene that I would have liked to see there.
We never found out what the transformation entailed.
No.
There was, they made comment that, they scoop your eyeballs out and take your heart and your brain.
The organs and the blood go to the hospital.
And the bits and pieces go off to the hospital. But immediately I turned to my wife and said, how's he going to turn into a lobster?
Yeah.
His brain will not fit in a lobster.
Yeah.
So it's kind of left as, it's just a bit of magic in the film. It's the science in this science fiction was more the science of sociology and psychology rather than science of physics and chemistry. Yeah. The movie couldn't have worked any other way. Like if they had tried to actually have a viable way of turning people into animals, the whole thing would just make... I mean, it made no sense anyway, but it would have not been internally consistent.
Yeah.
It would have tried too hard. It would have been the midichlorians explaining the Force, where you kind of watch it and go, did we need to know that?
Yeah.
That's... Oh, well, okay. If you're gonna do that, well, sure. It sort of seems a bit of a strange choice, but... Yeah, so I think it would have been a strange choice to get an insight into the process.
Yeah.
It would have been revealing something that... best left unreveled.
Yeah, and I think it is a good example probably as a story that, well, as an audience member, I went along with it. I didn't really need to see it. Like, I would have liked to see in that scene to that particular character. You like a bit of revenge for her. It's the same with, the leader, the loner leader at the end. It's good that we see that she's going to probably be eaten alive by the wolves and the dogs and stuff. So it's always nice, isn't it? The sadistic or the bad people in a story, to get some sort of just reward, deserved punishment, I suppose. Sorry, not reward. But Yeah, but I agree. Like the narrative didn't necessarily need to reveal that to us.
No, it was made stronger by not having that. It was just because there were so many of these questions in the movie. For example, why do they have these rules? Why are the loners not allowed to flirt?
Yeah,
it's like, but everyone accepted that, even though it largely only seemed to be the leader who was making this rule up. But it was being an extreme example of the people who had rejected partnership as a way of life,
and also then just I suppose becoming an animal.
And I think we've all felt that way at some point in our younger years or older years. That sort of thing. Oh well, I don't need a partner. I'm just fine by myself and all the rest of it. And they sort of took that concept. I think the whole I'm not going to get a partner. I'm never going to get married. And now let's take that to extreme absurd.
Yeah, that's right.
To see how that turns out.
They obviously didn't watch that role play in the hotel, but did they? You know, that you're going to choke to death or be raped.
What happens?
Either way, what happens? I love that was another.
And are you just going to dance by yourself to electronic music?
So, did you feel? I mean, we like to focus on the sci-fi. Did you feel that science, or what did you kind of get out of the interpretation of this story in the sciencey world?
Well, I said so. Science fiction isn't just about physics and chemistry. It can also be about psychology, sociology, and that's what this film is about. Take an aspect of our society, they've pushed it into and pulled it apart into an absurd degree to get a message across. Yeah. Because if you're trying to be too subtle about these things, particularly when you're talking about relationships and so on, it just the message of the relationship gets disappeared. Yeah. But in keeping with their all of the hotel staff tend to wear lab coats most of the time when they were doing things.
Even the musicians
at the dance were all look like lab technicians or something.
Is that why I was thinking this is what they do in their after hours? Like they obviously change people to animals, but they also play drums.
They're great musicians as well. No, so I actually...
And guards as well. The guards were in the lab coats. And, they had
it was like an institution.
Yeah.
So back in my day, when I was actually looking for my wife, I wasn't looking for my wife as such, but when I was alone and in Melbourne, I actually came up with a criteria for what I wanted. I thought, well, these are the definite no's. She had to be short-sighted, have a limp. No, but there were some definite no's which were regarding those sort of incompatible
traits,
social bits. Yeah. So, for example, a smoker. I don't smoke, and I thought, well, it's just going to be too hard. One smoker, not smoker. I'm not vegetarian, so I thought, well, again, I was thinking well in advance of like family meals. I'm like, I was like, no, I don't want to have those arguments, have that tension. If I go vegetarian, it would be with my wife, both of us becoming vegetarian, for example. And so there are a few of those things. But I also read this beautiful article which was about applying game theory and statistical analysis to how you should know when to choose your partner. Because if you're going to look at it from a point of view of maths, you've got basically a stream of partners that you're going to meet, potential partners, shall we say, and assuming you're only dating one person at a time. So you'll meet these people one at a time, and generally you often can't go back to a previous. So you meet someone and you have to make a decision at some point. Are they the best for me? Are we going to have the best relationship? Or is this going to be a subpar relationship and then my next one will be a better one? But at some point you've got to think, well, if you keep doing this, you're never going to know because you don't know what the next one coming is. And you don't know how many more you have. So you can, if there's a little statistical analysis you can use, which is usually applied to cards in a deck, where you've got 52 cards in the deck of so many suits and so forth. And the idea is that you get one card dealt out to you one at a time and it has a value. And your idea is to stop at the point where you think you've got the highest value you can get. And to boil all that down, you figure out a whole bunch of these variables. For example, how long you're going to be dating for, how many people you meet per day or week or year, how long each of those relationships is, and so on. And it boils down to basically after about between 7 and 10, you should pick the next person you come across who's better than the one prior. The relationship, I shouldn't say person, because it's actually the relationship you have with the person. Like people can't be valued on an individual, but you get the idea. So as it turns out, I chose my wife as number 11. She was better than the previous ones I could remember. It's possible that I'd have a relationship, a more fulfilling relationship maybe, by going to number 12, 13. But as it turns out, statistically speaking, I was best off placed choosing her. But that led me, though, because that goes on and on for a bit. But I found an even more interesting take on this. More interesting because it involves aliens and space. And thus it's good. So have you ever heard of the Drake equation? The Drake equation was, I don't know the guy's first name. Frank. Dr. Frank Drake. So he's asked this question. We've got the Milky Way full of stars, full of possible planets with possible civilizations. How many are out there that we can talk to? So the Drake equation is an attempt to sort of encapsulate all the variables that would be relevant to establishing the number of intelligent civilizations that existed in the Milky Way galaxy, which would broadcast radio signals at any particular point in time.
For sure, yeah.
So he plugged in a bunch of numbers and came down to a number 10,000. Said in the Milky Way right now, at any given point, there's about 10,000 civilizations able to communicate. To take it further, this fellow Peter Backus, he wrote a paper which says, Why I Don't Have a Girlfriend, an application of the Drake equation to love in the UK. Now, the easy answer is the reason you don't have a girlfriend is because you're applying the Drake equation.
That's right.
But hey, I applied this other equation and I got a girlfriend.
You're looking
so
at
it
key
worked
criteria.
out. So anyway, so the Drake equation has a bunch of formulas. Where the number of civilizations capable of interstellar communication is equal to the rate of formation of stars capable of supporting life, times the average number of planets similar to Earth per planetary system, times the fraction of the Earth-like planets supporting life of any kind, times the fraction of life-supporting planets where intelligent life develops, times the fraction of planets with intelligent life that are capable of interstellar communication, times the length of time such communicating civilizations survive. So that came down to some, like there's 300 billion stars.
Yeah.
And you put those numbers in and you end up with this number of about 10,000 civilizations. So he took those in and said the number of potential girlfriends in the UK is equal to the rate of formation of people. So that's about 150,000 people per year, times the fraction of people in the UK who are women, so 0.51 apparently, times the fraction of women in the UK who live in London, that's 0.13, times the fraction of the women in London who are age appropriate, because obviously too old, too young, no good, times the fraction of age appropriate women in London with a university education, because for some reason he decided he had to have a girlfriend with a university education. At one point I thought I had to have the same thing until I realised that cut out too many good women and I refined that into being women who had some desire for lifelong learning and development, which is what I was really looking for. Multiplied by the fraction of university educated age appropriate women in London who this guy, Peter Backus, was physically compatible with. Multiplied by the length of time and years that he's been alive, thus making a possible girlfriend encounter available. So he throws all that in and finds out that there are 10,510 people in the UK that satisfy his most basic criteria for being a girlfriend.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so
it's a good number for him.
So what he's saying is basically, on any given night out in London, there's somewhere around 1 in 1,000 chance that he'll meet an attractive woman, according to his personal standards of attractive, between the ages of 24 and 34, with a university degree. It doesn't take into account, though, he says here, the fraction of those women who would find him attractive.
Yes.
So, but 1 in 1,000?
Yeah.
And he says, it seems a bit low, but actually, not too bad, particularly if he actually does break out some of the criteria. So he removes the university education from that, immediately quadruples the number of women. Yeah. So it's about 1 in 200 or so.
Yeah.
Not a bad effort.
There'd be that many people on the tube,
Yeah, could do. The only problem is he's now got to find some way to actually talk to them.
That's right. And talking about this experiment is probably not the best start.
Although it would very quickly whittle away the women that he was appropriately
and it would be better than talking about breaststroke like John does to the nosebleed woman.
Is that his name?
Yeah.
Go and the nosebleed woman's introduces her. I'd like to introduce you to my best friend. No name.
Yeah, that's right. No
It's just
name of it.
my
The blonde,
best friend.
the one with the nice hair.
Nice hair. It's
Yeah.
like, that's it, yeah. Okay, so that was my take on the technicalities of this movie.
And I think like you're touching on it, and that's why right at the start of this show I said experiment, you know, because I think they are revealing a version, you know, like, yeah, it's an experiment on our society, you know, taking our society to the extremity of relationships.
It's an extreme what if, because you've got some others like, I suppose, The Martian, which is another experiment. What if we shove someone on Mars by themselves with almost no resources?
Yeah, and Surrogates, that sci-fi movie where people are plugged in and clones go out in society, and so they're versions of themselves. Bruce Willis is in it, and the Australian actress, I can't quite put my name on her right, but that film, you know, I mean, it's a detective kind of sci-fi story, like I, Robot or whatever, but in Surrogates, we send out clones, and of course, as the film goes along, we realize, you know, the humans that have got the clones out, the clones are really good looking, and they're state of the art, and they're young and all that, attractive, like Hollywood actors, yet the real people back at home operating the clones are not, you know. So there is a bit of an experiment going on there, like social media, like how you position yourself online, you know, what do you look like, your selfies, etc. So I think this film did do that, and there is a lot of those scenes, you know, the singleness, the isolation, being alone, versus being with a relationship, and how kind of absurd that is for us, you know, like the dance floor, like we've talked about, you know, like it is a bit weird, isn't it? You might dance with someone and then you walk away and you never dance with them ever again.
I've had those very same experiences.
There's an awkwardness to it, and I think the film took that awkwardness and really pushed it to the max, you know, and so that's how I saw it, that experiment. But it was interesting. Yeah, you delving into the Drake formula.
Well, I think it was relevant. As I said, there seemed to be lab coats, and they had this number 45 days. I couldn't. The only thing my wife and I, we spoke about, why would it be 45 days?
Yeah,
and my wife put forward, well, it would make sure that the women went through an ovulation cycle. So it doesn't matter what time they came into it; they would at least have one full cycle.
Yeah. And they do, you know, like they don't really do much else to them, I suppose, but day one, how it's one hand, you know, so again, the partnership idea, I suppose, like two hands are better than one, or, you know.
Yeah, just how hard it is to do things by yourself.
And they do sexually stimulate them, and then yet which is a very awkward scene again with that maid in the hotel.
He says, oh, this is really awful. Do we have to do it? Yes, we do. Yeah. And at first you think, oh, okay, so what, they've got to have sex.
Yeah.
No,
just stimulation.
Just stimulation.
Just enough.
And
she's timing his erection.
Yeah, it was faster.
It was faster though. Yeah.
Well, that's a good sign.
You know, and I think she does say, oh, it's good for your state of being or something.
Your motivation.
Yeah, your motivation. Yeah, that's it. And of course, the John C. Reilly character being caught for masturbation. Well, if you're masturbating, then you're not going to be as desperate or motivated to go get a partner. And yeah, I know it's bizarre, but yeah, I think that there was experimental bits, wasn't there, along the way. Technicalities, I suppose.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the story structure or music. The use of sound in this film was quite interesting,
quite powerful. Yeah,
it's certainly more noticeable for me than Passengers. So
yes, yeah.
What did you think of that?
Yeah, well, the music was that sort of real classical set for the scenes that were being shown. Scenes music-wise that really stood out to me. There was 3 or 4 moments in the film where also filmic-wise or editing-wise, we had slow motion. So again, when he approached the nosebleed girl to ask her for a dance, you know, it's a real slow motion of him walking across to her, and again, kind of like bizarre world that you know, the walk over to a girl, you know, to ask her on a date. But at the same time, and the sound on that was that. So yeah, there was a really strange use of orchestral music over slow motion video or film where he walks over to the nosebleed girl, and I guess it's that, you know, that strange feeling when you are walking up to someone to ask them on a date. But then again, he's not showing much emotion, which fits in with the story. That slow mo, to me, I was like, this is weird. You know, they're really commenting on this. Same time, that exact same effect was used for the hunt. So when they're hunting the loners, we got slow motion of them running into the forest, all in suits and those dresses and stuff with their tranquilizer guns. And the poor loners were fleeing, and you knew they had an advantage on them because obviously they were being looked after a bit better at the hotel. And the heartless woman, there was a slow-mo, she didn't just shoot one, she like knocked the woman to the ground. Yeah. And she was punching her. And it was all in slow motion with that classical, real upbeat sort of music. And I think, again, it was kind of like, this is weird. Like, this is a weird tradition that these people are doing. So to me, the music and the slow motion was a really interesting effect. And apparently, even though I haven't looked into his other films, the director does do that in his other films. So it's something that is repeated in earlier films. But I found the music,
perhaps
that was
he's perfected it a bit more now.
He has perfected it a bit more, yeah. So that slow motion shots, I think again that probably as an audience, something like slow motion with that music, you're segmented back into your reality a little bit. Like, it's so over the top that you're kind of like, oh, you know, this is another world.
A bit like Clockwork Orange, where they have the classical music playing whilst they're vandalising and painting.
Yeah, so anything that speeds up and slows down footage, you are a bit more taken out of your element. You know, you notice it as a audience member. And they also did it with the couple in the city as well. There was slow motion when they were walking. So yeah, he just chose some weird moments to do that. You say Clockwork Orange, I think filmic wise, again, there was some sort of reference to probably Kubrick's symmetry, or symmetrical shots, that we see in things like, Clockwork Orange, The Shining again, and 2001. And probably also reference to someone like, Wes Anderson's films and how he kind of shoots things like hotels and stuff.
It was I got that feeling as well.
Yeah, there was a bit of a reference maybe to each other because those two are directors at the same time.
What about Psycho? Did you pick up it with the strings?
Yeah, the strings moment. Yeah, I think that probably.
Yeah, sort of a few of the action sequences would be punctuated by the orchestral sort of hits and the strings striking.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah. And I mean, I was going to say, you know, on that with the film wise, we probably had a Wes Anderson in the hotel moments, and then also, like earlier people like Fellini's, films, we definitely see some references to those shots. And again, something that he does do really, really well, and he does it from that opening shot of David is behind the head. So the scene is happening, and we are, as an audience, not allowed to really have that close up. We don't get the intensity in a way.
We don't see his eyes.
We don't see his emotions on his face, which is very normal in most films. And I mean, again, we're kind of standing back from this film. And I in looking at the film, filmic wise, I did notice that there's a lot of long shots, a lot of slow long shots. And again, you mentioned in the pool, we don't really 100% know if John whacks his head or not. When David's also like, he looks down at the blonde girl she's turned into the pony. We don't get the close-ups of it, you know. And even at the start with the woman killing the donkey, we stay in the car. She gets out of the car and kills it, and we're just seeing it through the front windscreen. And even when when David and the short-sighted woman do make out in that lustful scene, we're kind of back. We're not really in on it. We are back on it, you know. Yeah. So there's lots and lots of long shots. This is really, because technically you could say this is bad filmmaking, but the way he does it is great. Is cutting people's heads off as well.
Yeah, this is the hotel manager.
The hotel manager character.
And this is my partner.
Yeah, and we don't see.
You can't see
his face. Happens to David as well. There's a couple of scenes where we see his belly and he's changing his pants and stuff. We see it in the loner forest as well, where the people are cut off. So we're either kind of more abstract, further back, long shots, or if it is closer, we're losing people's heads.
Which flows in with the lack of emotion.
It does.
People are actually feeling emotion.
Yeah.
There's a scene where the lisping man, John C. Reilly's character, corners David in the hunt and is pointing the rifle at him.
That's right.
And David then goes and starts trying to play with his emotions.
Yeah.
You're always my favourite. I don't even remember the other guy's name.
Yeah.
What was it? It's totally slipped my mind. I don't think about it all that much.
Yeah. You're my best friend in the whole world.
Yeah, you're my best friend in the whole world, blah, blah. And that doesn't work, so he then changes tact and starts going, you're just stupid, this sort of dumb thing.
You're ugly, what's another day going to give you?
But he's delivering it almost without emotion.
Yes.
And the lisping man's, he's not responding in the way you would expect. He's not lowering the gun and softening up. He's not then getting angry and he's just kind of standing there looking at him a little bit confused almost of what's going on. You're trying to make me feel something, but I don't understand.
So I think again it's the representation of relationships, that theme, that sort of idea of it being a bit absurd, and here it is in the extremity, and we are jarred as an audience. We're sort of back from the action, so to speak. So that really stood out to me. That was the main sort of, the film and the sound were the main technicalities that I wanted to kind of touch on. Yeah, was there anything else you...
I do have a question for you though. What was the name of the dog?
His brother.
His brother.
Bob.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
Bob. I think there was a good thing with that, and we saw it with the animals in the forest. We saw it with the blonde woman. John says, in his angry outburst, you're going to be eaten, because David wants to be a lobster. And I think he says, you'll be caught and stuck in a cage as a parrot and you've got to lisp. Why do you want to be the only animal that talks? Like, it's almost like, and with Bob the dog who gets beaten to death, as we talked about earlier, it's kind of like, are the animals really human? Do they know?
Well,
and even John's story, like how he says, I hopped the fence. I was expecting him to kind of go, and one of the wolves stood up for me. That was Mum. But no. But then, and two of them stood back.
It
wasn't like one stood back.
Made the point to say there was two of them.
There was two that stood back. And I hope one was my mum. I like to think one was my mum. So it's almost like they are turned into animals, but then they're just animals. Like they've lost their subconscious.
For a while considering the fact that maybe that was just a lie.
Yeah.
I
did think
they
that
just
too.
paraded the animal past.
Yes.
And there was a bit that said, so many people want to be dogs. That's why there's just dogs everywhere.
Yeah.
But they're unusual animals, they're rare animals. That's why they're endangered, because no one wants to be them.
Yeah.
But that almost sounded like sort of a story you'd tell a child.
That's right,
to explain something in a very simple way.
Yeah.
There's kind of a bit of a question there. Did people actually get turned animals, or were they just kind of disposed of?
Yeah, and like you said earlier, there's that scene where they say, the organs are donated or removed and used for science, and the blood is almost like, well, is there anything left? Like what is left? Like what are they actually? And we never see the transformation, so you don't really know. However, David transforms the heartless woman, and apparently that worked and everything. So you presume it is a process.
Yeah.
So he must have witnessed it. He did it himself. So but I did question the whole thing with Bob. It's not. Yeah. Is Bob his real brother or not?
Are they just given a dog?
Yeah,
that's your brother. By the way,
brother, yeah.
It's not like he was an intelligent dog.
No.
Just played fetch.
He just was the dog, wasn't he? Yeah.
Hung around like a dog would. Yeah.
His name is Bob. Yeah, Bob the dog. That's a very bland name, isn't it?
Well, the biscuit woman who jumps out the window and just about cracks herself open. She actually starred alongside Ricky Gervais in a show. Do you know what the show's called?
Ricky Gervais, it would either be The Office, Extras, or Derek.
It was Extras.
Extras, yeah.
Extras, yeah. So she was Maggie Jacobs, the offsider who he would meet up regularly with.
Yeah, right.
Who was also an extra, didn't do very well.
Yeah. I would like to say I loved the reference to her as a character, the woman that liked the butter. Was it buttermilk biscuits?
She seemed the nicest.
She did seem very nice, And she
was very desperate to be in a partnership.
She was very desperate. She was offering all sorts of services.
And then threw herself out the window. Didn't throw herself out high enough.
Yeah.
As she sat there screaming for
That was
a
pretty brutal scene. I mean, talk about disturbing scenes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You felt for her. And I think because she rang David and sort of, it's a very awkward phone message, not sexy, not romantic, not any, you must be in the bathroom. Oh, I'll call back later when you're out of the bathroom, you know. And we hear that once live while he's playing golf, and then after her attempted suicide, he plays it again, and we hear the whole message again. So it's, it's added weight to her.
Golf being one of the only sports the singles are allowed to play. Squash or golf.
Squash or golf.
Not tennis.
No, not tennis.
That's doubles. That's for the couples only.
That's right, couples only.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
I do have something interesting about lobsters, because I was wondering there about lobsters living 100 years and fertile. But there's an interesting thing here that research suggests that lobsters don't stop growing.
Oh.
Or rather, the case is they're not sure what the maximum size of a lobster is.
Right.
There must be some sort of physiological limit to their physiology. Their lungs or their gills can only do so much. But they're saying one of the problems they have is that lobsters are only studied by trapping them, and the traps are only designed to catch lobsters of maybe, up to 60 centimetres sort of long.
Mm.
So they have caught sort of 10, 15 kilo lobsters, which you could imagine are quite big, only because they've got one claw trapped in the trap, not because they themselves have got the trap. So there is a question of how much bigger do they grow? We don't know, because we don't catch them. And they live in quite deep, cold oceans. That really opened up my imagination there to thinking that I could probably sit down to a lobster dinner, maybe, of a 20 kilo lobster.
Yeah, this huge lobster.
That lobster tail the size of your leg.
Puts a bit of, and I suppose they're bottom feeders, aren't they? I think. I've heard people say that before. Like, it's, as humans, it's considered this real expensive wine and dine kind of, lobster. And yet it's, they sort of eat the bottom stuff of the ocean.
The oldest lobster I found was, I think it was 80 years old.
Yeah, right.
And it was caught between Australia and New Zealand. So that's deep, cold ocean. And they're expensive now, but back in the day in the US, they were what they fed the prisoners and servants. Right. Because they're like the cockroaches of the sea, as they're called. And they were considered to be tasteless. And in Maine, up around there where Stephen King likes to write, they had to have laws limiting the number of lobsters served per week, because the prisoners and the servants were complaining that they had to eat too much lobster.
Too much lobster.
And to me, that sounds bizarre.
It does sound bizarre.
Considering
too much lobster.
How much you've got to spend to get a lobster these days.
Yes, that's right, yeah. But that would be interesting, and conjures up a whole other science fiction world as a 20 kilogram lobster.
Well, you can imagine the size of it. Like a small dog.
Yeah. And I mean, so you do, he says 100, you're saying 80 years. I mean, I guess they just get bigger the older they get, I suppose.
Yeah, well, they just keep shedding their shell and growing a new shell.
Growing a new one, as long as they've got a good food source.
Yes, that's the executive director of the Lobster Institute at the University of Maine. That's Robert C. Bayer. He's the one who said, when we catch one that is 20 to 30 pounds, like 10 to 15 kilos, it's because a claw got caught in the entrance of the trap. Not because it's inside. Yeah,
so it must be big. It must be very big.
Yeah, they just, I don't know how big a trap you'd have to have a big trap to try and catch a lobster of that sort of size.
Yeah.
And they eat each other is the other problem as well.
Yeah, right.
So there's big ones going around.
Big one might eat another bigger one as well, so there's less
sounds
bigger
like
ones.
Sharknado 6, the lobster tsunami or something.
Now, the Lobster movie website, you can go on, answer some questions, and you turn out to be an animal. What animal did you turn out to be, Surrey?
I took this before I watched The Lobster.
Yep.
And it asks you a bunch of questions which seem strange. And it even asks you your sexual preference, your partner preference, male, female. Yep. And it's got the male-female one. That's greyed out. It says not available at this time. And that's actually from the scene in the movie where David has to answer those personal questions. Yeah. So are you heterosexual or homosexual? And I really like the fact that he stops and pauses and he really considers it very hard. He says, I did have a homosexual encounter in college once. Can I be bisexual? No, I'm afraid bisexual is not a choice available at this time.
At this time, yeah.
So I'm not sure, was that just because there were no other singles identified? Maybe this hotel doesn't cater to bisexuals?
To me, it sounded like they used to do it, and then maybe it hasn't worked out very well or something.
Yeah, they found it's too ambiguous for their system of checking and
because they also made it. Remember the shoes? Like he goes, was he 44 and a half or something? She's like, no, it's 44 or 45.
Yeah,
so I think that's the thing. It has to be.
Yeah, that was great. But I went through the questions and I came up. I was optioned. I was given the option between swan or lobster.
Yeah.
I chose swan.
Yep, Swan.
Because, what would they say? Swans did something or other. Happy alone, but they did mate for life.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. But I thought, oh yeah, that's probably fair enough.
Yeah. So it's good to check out. It'd be good to know anyone listening out there. If you do it, you could let us know your animal.
There is a share button.
There is a share button. You can
tweet
share it. Yeah. It's good, support the Lobster, the movie. And for me, it was an owl. So I don't quite remember what the qualities of an owl are. I suppose nocturnal, up at night, sees well. Not the short-sighted problem.
It mentioned the 270-degree rotation.
That's
of the
right.
neck.
Yeah, it's all about the eyesight, I think, which is probably a bit irony for the Lobster.
The eyesight was played a lot there. I keep coming back to the fact that he was short-sighted.
Yeah, short-sighted. His wife leaves him for another short-sighted man. He's forced out into the real world. He can't find anyone else in the hotel that's short-sighted. Finds a short-sighted woman. Then she's blinded. He asks all these other things. Do you speak German? Yeah.
No. Do you think you could learn German?
Yeah.
Maybe after a year I would be okay, but not very good. I don't think it's practical.
Is he so? And then that's the thing. At the end of the film, he's so defined by short-sightedness, he can't stab his eyes. Like he can't get rid of the short-sightedness. Symbolically short-sighted. You can't see close in front of you. And she's then blinded, so she can't see anything as a character. So. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Eyesight, seeing the world. We could go down that whole path which the Lobster presents. So is there anything else, Surrey? I think we've probably covered everything.
No, well, geez, there is so much more to talk about for the movie, but let's...
Such a good movie. So, Lobster is just such a great film overall, and I'd recommend it to anyone out there. Go check it out. Be prepared to be disturbed and maybe possibly find it funny at the same time. I did laugh in moments of this film, and I was really drawn into the idea, the extremity of relationships and that being played out.
It is a movie that's going to last with me, stay with me.
Yeah.
I've found online that the reactions to it are polar.
Yeah.
So people either totally got it and loved it, or they just utterly did not get it and did not like it at all. There was no middle ground on this one.
Yeah.
So I would suggest you go into it with an open mind, expect to laugh at things that you probably shouldn't.
Yep.
And be surprised at it. And I think you're going to have a great time.
It'd be great to hear anyone's response out there to The Lobster, and you can let us know. And also, if you want to check into next week's episode,
The Beyond from 2018.
Yeah, so try to watch that before tuning in to the next episode of Space Brains.
See ya.
See you later.